Was the Bible mistranslated? Was it done on purpose? Was it done accidentally? Possibly both. Today's going to be an interesting video because we're going to talk about Bible mistranslations and we'll see what we can come up with. Whenever you translate something that was in one language into another language, it presents a problem. And the big problem is you have to have a mastery of the language that you're taking it from and what you're translating it into. And besides that, and depending on the works that you do, you have to have knowledge of the works. So you have to have a good knowledge of the works. God protects his word, his written word. So you have to be pretty much spiritually clean, praying to God as you're doing this in order to actually translate it correctly. And it's very difficult. That's why we use interlinear Bibles. A lot of times I'll go back in the Old Testament. I want to see what it says in the Hebrew, because you need to see how it was actually written to find out if you're translating it right or if you're understanding it right. But translating the Bible is pretty difficult work. And there's also other things. God protects his word, via translation, and also like the Dead Sea Scrolls physically. He'll keep it in a cave. Whenever you think it's gone, it pops back up again. They find scraps here and there of what was written originally. I'm going to start with Matthew chapter 1. We can't even get out of the first chapter of the first book before we hit our first major, and I'm saying this is a major mistranslation. Now, when you read Matthew 1, it starts with the lineage, and it confuses you with the lineage because it has both Joseph and it mentions Mary. But let me read Matthew 1:16. And Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. See how they threw Joseph and Mary together in this passage? Lineages don't contain husband and wife. But here's the even bigger point on this thing. I'm gonna read 1:17. Now, here's where we see the first seal break here. It's Matthew 1:17. So all generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David to the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away unto Christ are 14 generations. The first two in the lineage are correct. There are 14, and the second, from the carrying away, there are 14. But when you get from the carrying away to Jesus, it's 13. Only 13 are listed because they have Mary and Joseph there, and they are the same generation. This is where it's off, because Joseph's lineage will come later in Luke, and you'll see his lineage. His lineage goes back to David, but through Nathan, David's son Nathan. This is where you need to know genealogy. Also, Mary's generation is what goes back through Solomon, which is the kingly line, to David. So Jesus is in the kingly line. So usually you don't have the wife in the lineage. Now, I don't know if they messed up, why there's only 13. Maybe Joseph was supposed to be somebody else, and they just threw in Joseph and threw in Mary right after. They might have got confused or overzealous, or maybe they read the name Joseph and Joseph was somebody else, and they just assumed it was Mary's wife. Either way, there's 13 generations there, and that's the error, and we see the seal broken. So obviously when they translated this, they got this wrong, and you can't go back, because the New Testament, they say it comes from the Greek. I don't believe it. I look at the Greek. I like I said, interlinear Bible. I look at the Greek. The Greek doesn't. The Greek parallels the English perfectly, almost perfectly, I should say. To me, the New Testament, it was written in Aramaic or probably Hebrew. I'm not sure, one or the other. You know what I mean? But I think this will be discovered one day, because we're going to have copies of these things. There are already copies, of Matthew and those in Hebrew. And I don't know if they contain the same error, but this is definitely an error, a translation error. And it's to signal us right off the bat look for translation errors in the future as you're reading. Be careful of them. Okay, let's move on to another translation error. And this occurs in Matthew 27:9. I'm not going to go through every translation error that I think there is. I'm just going to go through the most important ones just a few to give us some examples. So I'm going to read Matthew 27:29 here. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him that was valued, whom they of the children of Israel did value. Okay, here he's quoting Jeremiah, and he names the prophet. But the problem is, Jeremiah didn't say anything about that. He said nothing about the 30 pieces. So whoever translated it got confused between the prophets, and it's easy. I do that. I do that myself. I get confused between things, and you think, oh wait, that was one prophet. No, it was another. Well, I all the times that I've read Jeremiah, I never find it. I still keep my eyes open for it, but I've never found it. It's not there. He's actually quoting Zechariah, and he's quoting Zechariah 11:12, which I'm going to read for you here. If ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear, for they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. And I think he was just, whoever translated this, and it stuck. I mean, it stuck. We're stuck with this. It's not Jeremiah. It's obviously Zechariah. But these are the kind of things that we find. My next example is going to be a little more nefarious, I think, and I'm going to do that in part 3 here. Okay, this example is a little more nefarious. Let me just, let's go to Genesis 3:15. And this one's a little strange. And I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to read you 2 versions. Now, I've read the Bible complete, I don't know how many times, but I've read several versions, not only the King James. I usually circle the King James because to me that's the clearest, but I have read a couple others. One of them was the Roman Catholic Bible. So I want to compare what's written in the 2 of them, because you come across these as you're reading, you're like, wait, that's not right. But when you get to 3:15, I'm going to read the King James Version first. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. I wrote it in red, his heel. Okay, now let's quickly read the Roman Catholic version of that while it's fresh in our heads. I will put enmities between thee and the woman, and thy seed and her seed. She shall crush the head, and thou shalt lie in wait for her heel. See the difference? That was changed. It's her heel, his heel. What's the difference? One difference is the Roman Catholics put a lot of emphasis on Mary. Is this a reference to Mary? So how do we break the tie on this? How do we break the tie? I already alluded to this earlier in the video. We break the tie by going to an interlinear Bible. And when I went to the interlinear Bible to see what the Hebrew says, and the Hebrew says, drum roll, his heel. It is his heel. So this one may be a little nefarious. I almost think it's her on purpose. I don't know why. Nobody else. All the other translations, I looked at other translations, you can see them all. If you go to like a Bible Hub, you can see all the other translations by themselves, and I don't see another her heel. I think in conclusion, I'm just going to say that I give the people the benefit of the doubt. They tried to do the best they could translating it. I know, I get twisted too on these things, so it's hard. I understand it. We're humans dealing with this. God guides us, but we can still make our own mistakes. The monks, when they used to write copies of the Torah, they would do it in a state of ritual pureness. They would purify themselves, wash themselves, and then sit down, pray, and with a clean, not undefiled heart, they would translate, or not translate, copy, to make sure that they get the text correct. And it's an important thing to do. And I'm just going to close with 2 Timothy. All scripture is given by inspiration of God, and it's profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for the instruction in righteousness. Now, I think that's pretty much sums it up. We need to be righteous and take a righteous look and not try to pinpoint problems. I'm just pointing this out, these errors, just so you keep them in mind. And there are others. John 6, I think, is an error too, 6:4. But I'll talk about that probably on another day. But we'll end it here.